Let's open up the dice.pdf, which we are looking at on our screen here on the on here. So the way it is being coded looks like the software that is being used here is called Dreamweaver. You can use Dreamweaver as well. You can use Visual Studio Code. You can use whichever software that is being used. I'm not restricted on the software which you want to use, whether it's Eclipse, it's NetBeans. All I wanted to see, are you able to create Java files? Are you able to create script files? Are you able to create the code files? Are you able to link it? Now let's look at this first file. It's an HTML file, first barebone HTML skeleton. In this skeleton, we are creating two divs for text boxes and the button that will be using JavaScript. And there is a function. This button has a function which is a JavaScript function on click event, which says call this function roll dice. And this is roll dice HTML that will show up on the button itself. Where we will create the text boxes, we are going to create very shortly in the next 2 screens or so. But the thing is that the button is the button that we are creating on HTML. And I think there is no ID that is given to this button. So that's okay for now. But for the divs, under those divs, we will create HTML and we're gonna do something about it. Now this portion that that has a text written on it that will show on the button, it's called roll dice. It's also called as so this portion is called inner HTML. Okay, so in between the button tags, when the button is getting closed, and these are some JavaScript properties or the button related properties, how you want to make a look and feel the button is. But that's a topic for CSS and mostly like things like that. But here this portion is called inner HTML, so keep that in mind. Now under the div section, I want to create two divisions on the screen. First division is die and the ID is die, and I am relating and putting them into one class called dice class or dice class. Some people call it in English die or C is silent, whatever. But the ID, regardless whether it's die or dice 1 or dice 2, ID is die 1 and die 2, but they belong to the same class. So when I can refer to the class, it means it will apply to both the objects at the same time. This is the property of CSS that we all know. Heading is created with the status symbol, with the status ID, and the style is clear and it's left aligned. Nothing is put under the heading at the moment. Heading is currently empty. So the inner HTML of the heading H2 is empty at the moment. But we did created it with an ID called status. So we will be using die1, die2, status at some point as a reference in our code. We all know that if you want to give a CSS style, we will create the style tags and we could give the type is equals to text/CSS, and it will pick up the CSS style from there. So under those division, okay, so dice is created. Now I'm going to refer that class, that anything that belong to the dice class should look like this: 32 pixel background, border, padding, font size is 24, text align is center, margin is equals to 5 pixels. So these are some beautification sides of things of CSS. But in general, what I'm asking is that between the style tags, the CSS will be used and CSS will be applied to divs. Class is dice because we created both dices, die1 and die2 with the class dice. So I can refer to them as div.dice. Inner HTML of when the program will start by default should be displaying 0, 0. So dice 1 should be standing at 0 and dice 2 will be standing at 0. So when you roll the dice, when you have it in your hand, you don't know what's inside. So let's assume there is 0, 0 in those two dices that are in my hand. So this is the bare bones setup. Now you are seeing this roll dice function is not doing anything at the moment. But the divisions are created and they look and feel like a text box. I could have created the text box and put those zeros inside that, but that's okay. I created the two divs and defined that in the body of those divs. I want to put 0 with some padding, font size 24, and blah 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 that was discussed in the CSS file here. And this roll dice button is created immediately after this. So you can see the roll dice is showing up here, and this is the title of the button. Now come to the part where this roll dice function will be called. And this roll dice function is not coded yet. So on click button, the button says roll dice, but when I will click on this button is currently dead because this function is not written. Where this function will be written? As the name suggests, JavaScript is coming on click event. You can look at it. And here you go. Script tags are open. And under the script tags, I have a roll dice function that I'm going to create. With this roll dice function, bracket open, bracket close, and the curly braces are open. Here I'm going to write my code about this roll dice function. Var, as you can see in the JavaScript, you can declare the variable get element by ID. The ID of the element number 1 is die1. So I want to fetch the get element by ID into the die1 variable, and I'm pulling the object from the HTML with the name called die1. At the moment, the value of it is 0. And the value of this die2, but I'm pulling the object in the memory that is stored in the memory of HTML, and that's called die2. So die2 is also stored in the variable called die2. This die1 and this die1 are the same variable name, but keep in mind you have to pull the from HTML, and you can name it as X and you can name this as Y. That really doesn't matter as long as you know where you are pulling the information from and storing it. Usually keep the name same name as that. And if you're not sure what this does, as I mentioned it here, what does it do? Get the element from the HTML side by its ID and store it in JavaScript. Now I can refer this element from JavaScript as I have pulled that into a variable called die1 and die2 respectively. Status. Remember what was the status? Status was h2 that I created. Here it is, just above. h2 is currently showing nothing, but I actually did pull that up as well in my variable. Now I'm going to generate a random number between 1 and 6. Not 0 and 6. I want to generate a random number between 1 and 6. Remember, when we were looking at randomized function in Java, you start with 0 And if you want to include 100 in that random number, you stop at 101. So again, you start with 0, you generate a random number between 0 and 6. But whatever the number is generated between 0 and 6, 0 and 6 means less than 6. This means less than 6. It means it can generate a number between 0 and 5, because it will not be able to generate the number between the number 6 for sure. Whatever number it will generate, regardless whether if it generates 0, it will automatically will become 1. If it generates 1, it will become 2. If it generates 5, it will become 6, and if it generates 4, it will become 5. So we are successfully able to generate a number between 1 and 6 based on this logic. So because, yes, that's a good question. If we are generating, if we're going to put 7 in here, we'll not be able to stop 0 being generated. We want it to generate 0, but at the same time you say when you generate 0, I don't want you to keep 0, I want to add +1 to it. So in general, easier way to understand it is that upper limit is here, lower limit is here. That's about it. That's an easy way to understand it. But if you want to look at it, that if you don't do this +1 to it, what will happen? It will generate between 0 and 5, but we don't want 0, because when we roll the dice, we definitely have a number. Yeah, that's why you add +1 to it. This will help us generate a random number between 1 and 6. What does the floor do? I don't want to repeat that right now. What does that floor do? Remember the floor function I was explaining? If it generates 1.5, what will happen? It will go back to 1. So if it generates 0.5, it will go back to what? 0. But we don't want 0, so we add +1 to it. So 0.5 will become 0 because of the floor function, but when you add +1, it will become 1. Or I'm thinking out loud right now, but you could use math.ceil. I'm just thinking. I'm not a compiler at the moment. But what if you remove this +1s from it and you say math.ceil? So what will happen in that situation? If it generates 0.5, what does that mean? 0.5 will become 1, because you know there is a function in Java which is called math.ceil. This rounds the specific double value upward and return it. So if it is generated 3.424, what it will be generated? 4.0. So that's your assignment after the class as well. Change this function from math.floor to math.ceil and remove the +1, and run your program multiple times and see if you are able to generate 0 at all. If it will generate 0, it will be rounded upward to be 1. So what will happen if 0 is generated? It will go upward. Floor means down, ceil means up. Ceil we haven't used at all. So the programmer for this code that we are looking at has decided that he is going to use floor, and that's fine with me, but he is adding +1. So if it generates, let's look at one more time. If it generates 1.6, what will become? Go to the floor, This means it will become 1, and then you add +1 to it to make it 2. So this is how it is happening. So if it is 3.24, it is going upward to 4. But the reason that this 0 is put, because maths.floor is being used, we don't want to be in a situation that when we roll a dice, we will have a 0 being generated and we are not adding +1 to it. Because when we throw a dice on the table, we always get at least 1. Because of math.floor is being used, we want to avoid the situation of being 0. That is why +1 is being added. But if you use math.seal, then I think you will not need to use this +1. It will automatically cater that. Now, once those numbers are generated for the two dices, we wanted to show that the dice total is D1 plus D2. But there is a couple of things that we need to do before we say a sign off on this program, that this program is complete. This program is doing nothing. Let's say as such, let's say if you are making a snakes and ladder program, or you are playing a Ludo, or you are playing some other program that uses dice, this is the logic that you will need to create in that program. So let's say if you are making a program for casino, your logic for generating the dices will be like this. Let's say a CEO of the casino comes in and he says, I have an idea in my mind to generate a program for the roll of the dice. Can you make that program? The bare bone of this machine will be like this, of this program will be like this, and then you can fancy it up. You can make it a casino machine and with all the lightings and whatever. But the board, the chip on which this program will be installed, will be using this logic. So that's why I am very rough and dirty in my coding. I'm not a very good cosmetic person. I admit that. So I will not. When you will see my programs, they will have all the logics built in. They might not be as pretty as other people will do, but my logic is there and I'm able to generate the logic. So logics should be first created, and then those logics can be beautified later, as much as how you can do it. Anyways, coming back to it, var dice1 and dice2 is the total. There are a few steps remaining for this. If I say I need to change this value from 0 and this 0, what I will need to use, I remember I told you at the start of the program, this is called inner HTML section. This is the inner HTML section, correct? So I need to show the user that, hey, when you rolled the dice, a random number is generated. I have that random number stored in variable D1 and D2. I want to show you what number is generated. D1 is, let's say, whatever, 3. D2 is, let's say, generated 5. The total will be 8. That is currently stored in the dice total variable. We haven't used that variable, this dice total variable, as yet, but we are filling up those two divs, div1, die1 and die2, with their inner HTML section, and saying that, hey, whatever the D1 value is, it has to go here, and whatever the D2 value, it has to go here. So now, last nail in the coffin, status. Remember what is our status is? Status is our heading 2, and under that heading 2, I wanted to show the total. So I said status dot inner HTML. So this HTML, inner HTML, was currently sitting at empty, but I wanted to show that your both dices are rolled. You have generated the random number. Now I'm going to show that value. That value is being shown up in here, dice total, and put that in here. So now your script is complete, and you want to give some benefit to that user, saying that you rolled something, and let's say if you got double, for example, d1 and d2 both are equal. So if you rolled, and by luck the two numbers, random numbers that are generated, d1 and d2 both are equal, 3 and 3, let's give him a one more free turn. Let's say if he rolls the dice and if he gets 6 out of 6 on both the dices, let him give a free run. So that one is equals to d1 equal to d2. Why we are not using d1 dot equal ignore case d2? Why we are using d1 equal to d2? Because d1 and d2 are integer. They are not strings. So integers can be compared as it is. d1 equals to d2. Now let's run this program. You roll the dice. Oh, that's good. As you can see in the output, when I rolled the dice, the total became 2, and this is the status. You rolled 2, and you actually want what this plus equals 2 is doing. This will come no matter what, for sure. You rolled, but at the same time, only when d1 equals to d2, this one will be shown and added to the inner HTML. So this status will come no matter what, but this will only come when d1 is equals to d2. You are adding an additional text. Hey, you are lucky, you actually rolled it to a double, so you get a free turn. If in any other case, if the roll is 4 and 5, they are not equal to numbers, but you rolled 9, and it doesn't show double equals to whatever. So this completes this program. Let me download this program, and it's should be very easy. Here you go. Actually, it is running on my system. I'll roll the dice, roll the dice, roll the dice, roll. Here you go. 4 and 4, you get a free turn. And this happens only when d1 equals to d2. You add, you are not removing the existing text. You are adding. Plus equal to means add to an existing value this text that I want to add. So if I would have just put a equals to sign, this would have been removed totally. This would have been gone, and it will share double. You get a free turn, which I don't like. I want to keep the existing message and append to this message. So this means appending to the existing value. You all know that right now. By using I++, you all know that what it means. Any questions in this whole program? Because after this, your task is starting, and I'm going to ask you to do few things, and I want to see by sharing your screen to me or sending me the screenshots. So please download HTML file on your system, on your desktop somewhere. Create a folder and keep it in there on your desktop. Please download that, then I have a task for you to do. No, PDF is just an explanation. There's an HTML file, dices.html. Please download that file. And store that in your desktop. And I have a task for you guys. Small, easy task. All right. Let me know when you are ready. Download this dices.html, put it in your on your system, double click it and run it and see if you are able to run it in your browser. Running? Okay. So now Satnam says it's running. Um, there are not too many people in the class. Lena, I don't know what happens with Liji. She always keeps getting disconnected and reconnecting and reconnecting and disconnecting. I have to ask her what's the issue. Otherwise, she has to be in the class. But what I wanted to do now, yeah. Okay, now it works. So open your favorite HTML editor, whether it's Visual Studio Code, Notepad, Notepad++, whichever. What I want you to do is to separate out the CSS and JavaScript and put that into two separate files and then link that file into your HTML. We did that. We saw that in our last program when we were making that car racing game or whatever you call it. So they are separated out in that program. But the task that I'm giving to you is to separate it out here and then show me the output and show me those three files separated out. So look at that program and make sure the program from previous class and make sure you are able to separate it out. The code will not change much. The files will be separated out. So I wanted to know if there is any code that you can write or change it, please. This is an important stepping stone because we know I'm not taking quizzes, but this is a small quiz for you.
Hello, Mr.
Yes.
Kashan.
Yeah.
I can see the code, but I don't know how to download it
Oh,
because it
you can see the
doesn't
code, but
give me.
yeah, you can. You actually have downloaded it. So let me show you how.
Okay.
So you go here, right click, and obviously you have saved somewhere. I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to create it on my desktop. So I'm going to create, and let's say I'm going to create a new folder and it says dice. So once I click on dice and I'm going to save it, I'm going
But
to bring my, I'm just give me a sec here. I'm going to bring that. So this dice folder is created on my desktop. You can see, right? I'll open it up and then right click on it, open with
mm,
Visual Studio Code. Here you go. You are able to
mm,
see this code now. Are you?
no, can I share my screen, please?
Yes.
Because
Let
I
me
don't
just
have that
make you a,
option.
okay, let me make you a presenter. All right, go ahead. I'm going to unshare my screen.
Okay. So I can see, I can check if it works and everything, but
Yeah.
uh, the thing is that when I try to download it, I can I can see the option to download it.
Okay. Right click on it, save link
Yes.
as, and then save
Oh,
it where, save it. Now go to that folder which you created and right click on it, open with.
open with,
Here you go.
yes. Okay. Okay,
Now
I was trying to do something else. And I
that's
was
okay.
doing this. I was checking the code here.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So what I am asking, if I would be you, what I am asking now? What I'm asking is this dice program is here and I wanted to see open with Visual Studio, let's say. Okay, sorry, I'll just share my screen. Allow that. And then let's do this. let's look at the, if I would be you, what I will be doing. What I'm asking is create a CSS file. So new text document. I will say uh, dice, sorry, dice dot CSS. So dice.css is created. Now I want to create a new, another text document. I'm going to create dice. Maybe we'll just say a different name just so you know that it really doesn't matter whatever name that you give. Dice roll dot JS. So two files are created, and then this dice.html will stay there. Now remember from the last program that we learned, we have JavaScript file, CSS file, and HTML file. This was the whole zip that I gave you guys in this, right? So if I'll just go here and my desktop just for temporarily, I'm just going to save it under this dice folder as well. I'm not too much worried about it right now. So I'm going to delete that afterwards. But this index.html is created. So let me do few things. I want to see what I have done here. So I'll open up in a Notepad++. That's okay. And this is the link that I need to do, right? So I'll copy this in a clipboard. Copy this for a second. Go into this HTML file. Open it with Notepad or Visual Studio Code, really doesn't matter. And I'm going to say how. When the style sheet is mentioned, where it is mentioned, it's mentioned somewhere under the header. So I will stick to that. I'm not a very big expert on it, so I'll just say, okay, yeah, let's just copy this. I did that. I'll say under the header, right? I'm going to get rid of this for now. Okay. And I'll copy this in another place, for example, Notepad or something. And then I'll cut it from here because that's where I'm going to put the file out to be. So I'm just going to say, let's say, put it here. Let's open up a new Notepad, paste it here. I'm coming back to this in a second. But in here, I'm going to put up that same line that I'm asking you to do, Windows V. And this is the line that I'm asking you to put. But pity is that I don't have a style.css. What's the name that I give to this CSS file? Dice.css. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and name it as what? Dice.css. So I'm mapping from the old program to the new program. I'm just showing you how you will separate it out. Dice.css, file, save. This means now this dice file, I use this just a reference point. I'm not worried about this right at the moment. But this dice's file is now pointing to this CSS file. So if I go to this CSS file, what's inside it? Nothing. It's currently empty. So I copied the style in where? In the style tags, and I'm going to paste it here. Let's say save it. So this is my style. I'm able to save it. So now if I open up my dices.html, it should be pointing to this this file because I actually did that. If I open it up one more time, just to make sure, sorry, not in Visual Studio. There you go. It is pointing to dices.css. Now, if I run this, because it's safe, I'll just make sure everything is safe. Go back, run dices.html. So it means it's not reading it because it has lost the, it is not able to point to that file. So that's a problem. That's what I want you to do so that it's able to point to that file, because now the divs are there, but the divs cosmetics is lost. CSS is able to handle that. And if I go here, make sure open with, I'd like to open it with Notepad++, dice.css. So link style sheet href dice.css file. So it should be able to do that. Let me make sure it is a CSS file. It should do that. Do you agree? But it's not able to point it because if I go here, open with Notepad, exactly the same line. But what's the difference? What's the problem that I am having? Okay, let's do one more change and see what I can do. Let's remove the script part out of it for now, just so we are certain that the script is not coming. So let's cut that out. We'll get that in a moment. So in the header, we have the link, style sheet, CSS, and we are pointing to the, see, so let's see if it is able to open up that file under the dice folder. Is it able to open that file? Yes, but I found the issue. It is saying there is a problem. View the problem. Okay, this is the problem. It should be, this is the HTML text that I left in there. It should be like this. I saved it. I fixed my error. Now let's go back. Let's put the script back up. And the good thing I like about Visual Studio Code that it lets you point out. So now if I run this program, here you go. I fixed it. So I did some extra tags left were there. But now you see the beauty of it now. I'm able to separate out the CSS in a CSS file. It's not residing under the HTML file. So my next task to you guys is that, can you, right now JavaScript file is empty. What I want you to do is to move this script, just JavaScript function, into this JS file and point in the HTML file to that JavaScript file. How it's been done here, this is your guiding line, and I will not going to do and spoon feed you guys everything. So you guys have to do it on your own. How I'm able to point to the script file? This is the way. Right now for this program, index.html, it does not have a JavaScript and CSS file. Really doesn't matter because that's not my program that I'm running. I'm running the program for dice. So I want to move the code of the dice JavaScript code into this JavaScript file, and I want this HTML file to point to this. I can go ahead and delete this file if I need to, because this is just a reference file for me. You get that point? So please move this file, move the JavaScript code into .js file and point the dice.html. So when I click the roll button, it should perform the way I want it to.